guys, how's it going? You know, I was just working a regular shift at this family pizza place, and the robot things just started moving. I think they're haunted. The security guard isn't here at the moment. Please leave a voice message after the beep. Yeah, I don't think he liked that. You see, earlier I was trying to calm him down by reading him the 3rd official issue of Low IQ Weekly. But I don't think most of this information is correct. The first horror game wasn't the 1981 3D Monster Maze. Everyone knows it was the 1972 haunted house for the Magnavox Odyssey. I mean, it wasn't good, but it's about principles. Fallout 1 isn't primarily classified as a horror game. The Overseer just looks like that. PT never released, and no one liked the ending of Outlast. Wait a second. Are you guys thinking what I'm thinking? What if this big fella, this incredibly thin and muscular bear, is after genuine, factual information about the horror game genre? Oh, okay. I know he liked that one because he didn't say no, and that's how consent works. Back in the very early days of video games, horror wasn't really that big of a genre. Or really a genre at all. This was technically the first horror game. Like, what in the Cartoon Network? In fact, none of the few horror games in the 70s were really scary. For most of the 70s, video games were still in their first generation, before microprocessors allowed developers to make more distinct visuals, before pixels were even widely used. Okay, so horror wasn't really off to the greatest start. Most developers that were getting into this entirely new territory didn't immediately want to scare everyone away. No one really knew how horror fit into gaming until Roberta Williams and Malcolm Evans came along. Williams, of course, released Mystery House for the Apple II in 1980. Around this time, most computer games were text-based because they weren't really powerful enough to handle graphics. But this game started changing that. The game is about the player being trapped in a large mansion filled with 7 other people, except one of them is a murderer. The player must find out who it is before being killed themselves. This was originally only supposed to be a text story game, until the creator's husband suggested adding graphical scenes. Even though the graphics in this game were incredibly simple, something that looks equivalent to the work of a first grader, no one has ever seen anything like this before on a computer. A graphical video game that broke the looped 30-minute high-score chasing gameplay sessions of arcades. A graphical game with adventure, character, mystery, and most importantly, a story. This simple suggestion would create the first graphical adventure game, and can be retroactively viewed as the first exploration of what we now recognize as narrative horror. But that wasn't it. My man's Malcolm Evans, he saw what was going on here. He had to cook. The very next year, Malcolm Evans designed a 3D maze to test the capabilities of the ZX81 home computer, and with the suggestions of J.K. Gray, added a T-Rex, turning the program into a game. The goal? Avoid being eaten alive. We've now seen how horror introduced thrilling visual narratives with atmosphere and characters, but Mystery House was missing one vital staple of what makes horror games what they are today. Active suspense. Mystery House is a command game. It gives you all the time in the world to make your decisions. But what if you didn't have that luxury? What if they just saw you and now they're right behind you? The only thing you can possibly do now is run. 3D Monster Maze created the horror subgenre of survival horror. Games with horrific visuals with the intention to scare, but the player is incredibly limited in combat, and rather has to escape, last, or rely on another force to save them. Oh. There's 2 of them now. Well, it's a good thing this place was built with these steel bolted doors. The only thing that could stop me is if somehow keeping these doors closed required electricity. But that never happened. That's literally the dumbest thing in the... Bomba clot! By 1981, horror games proved themselves as a promising genre. They were among the first to break the traditional model of arcade games and pioneered longer experiences at the comfort of your home. It finally caught the attention of the biggest video game leaders of the time, Atari.
I like what you presented to me here, minion. It'll work immaculately with our home console, the Atari 2600.
Hey, how's it going? I'm the Atari 2600. Hey, what's going on? I'm a machine.
Available for purchase at your local Sears. Now we can give them the Atari Special. Mass produce them and make them worse.
Sorry, did you just say worse?
Yes, worse. We'll make direct movie tie-ins without at all referencing the source material.
Oh no.
And then we'll make them so confusing, not even I know how to play them.
Please, no.
And just wait till you hear about this one. E.T.
The video game crash of 1983 was a pretty terrifying event for the industry, and it's all Atari's fault. Atari began the trend of poorly made games and belittled horror from their nuanced experiences. What seemed like a promising genre sold poorly, and often hid in the back because retailers didn't want to keep showcasing them. Horror games were in an incredibly tough spot, and hardly any developer wanted to touch them. Okay, so somehow they're all gone and went back to their normal spots. I could wait until the power goes out and die, or open the doors and book it. I mean, at least there I'd have a chance. Okay, let's see what we've got. Fuck no. Y'all think they got insurance? Sure, developers didn't want to touch horror elements in video games due to various backlash, controversies, and groups committed to the idea that video games have the potential to lead to real-world violence. But they were also convinced that people just didn't want to play horror games. For a while, this was the case until a little game called Sweet Home released in 1989, based on its film counterpart. Directed by Tokuro Fujiwara, this game took everything that worked for horror in the past and combined it into one. 5 filmmakers are trapped in a haunted mansion, forced to use each of their special skills to find resources, fight, or successfully flee the supernatural so they can find their way out. This game is filled with a huge amount of disturbing imagery. There's an incredible amount of blood, corpses, and skeletons. It played out the harsh themes of death, the unliving, and ritualistic horror. The West was still struggling with gruesome imagery in video games, but this game blew up in Japan. Its use of QuickTime events, limited resources, storytelling through cutscenes, potential permanent death, and its 5 different endings made it a landmark for horror games, being the inspiration for one of the biggest games in the world, Resident Evil. Now, remember, back in the US, throughout the late 80s to early 90s, horror was pretty much an ignored genre. Its early exponential growth was halted due to Atari's goofy antics, and no developer in the US was willing to take that big of a risk. Okay, so even though not many were willing to put their hands on horror, what about violence? In the early 90s, violence was actually making ground in the industry. It was incredibly controversial, even landing itself into political discussion in the federal government. But unlike horror back in the 80s, many people liked these games. Mortal Kombat, Doom, and many more challenged the US industry and forced it to change. The ESRB rating system was established in 1994, allowing mature games to have an economically safe and easier time finding its audience, perfectly setting up the stage for Resident Evil. Released in 1996, Resident Evil follows the investigations of both the Bravo and Alpha team of STARS, Raccoon City's Special Tactics and Rescue Service. Bravo team was sent to the Arklay Mountains to investigate a series of cannibalistic homicides, but early in their trip, they mysteriously disappear. The very next day, the Alpha team is then instructed to go after them in hopes of finding out what happened and completing the initial mission. Capcom knew just how good of a game they had in their hands and published it everywhere. 3D Monster Maze may have created the survival horror genre, but Resident Evil defined and popularized it. It shifted zombies from being supernatural but scientific, creating a whole new genre of zombie-related media. Resident Evil put horror games back into the mainstream, inspiring games like Silent Hill, The Evil Within, and of course, The Last of Us. Well, guys, this might be it. I'm surrounded.